Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today is episode number 32. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko. I'm an immigration lawyer and the founder of Laborless, an immigration tech startup automating H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which brings you the show. Today, I'm first of all joined by a guest in Australia, which is incredible because I'm so grateful for him taking his time in the morning. But more importantly, our guest today, John Cameron, the CTO and co-founder of Talent Beyond Boundaries. Super incredible organization. They are connecting refugees and others who have, had to flee their country for whatever reason, who are skilled with opportunities around the world for work, particularly within their skill set. Really incredible organization that's not only helping people who are, in a position of kind of vulnerable position, but also, of course, filling skills gap around the world. So I think this is a really brilliant way of leveraging technology, connecting people around the world with opportunities. I'm so excited for this opportunity to speak to John. So John, thank you very, very much for joining, and I appreciate you spending your morning with us.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure.
I know I mentioned this to you briefly beforehand, and I've said this to a couple of other guests, but when I launched this show, this podcast, the recording's live at 4 p.m. Eastern on Fridays here on the East Coast, which I thought, okay, 1 p.m. in California. I never in my wildest dreams thought that anybody would be outside of the boundaries of North America. Really, really America. I thought, okay, maybe Canada. So I'm just honored and really happy to have you here and, talk to you and learn about your story.
Well, when you work for any kind of organization that's global, we spend the day never stops, and it's a 24-hour cycle. And Talent Beyond Boundaries is, and my previous previous company was as well. So you kind of get used to it, and I actually think that's the fun. I really like working for global orgs, although with all the problems and time zones and stuff, it's kind of exciting.
So let me ask you this: do I have to look forward to more sleep or less sleep as things move on for me?
No, less sleep.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
Yeah, it just doesn't stop. So that's it's hard to escape it. You'll have that problem. It's hard, and it's really how you really got to really carve out some time, because otherwise it's 24/7.
Yeah, I can imagine getting consumed. But so good already advice from the very beginning. So before we jump into it, just for folks listening and watching, if you're live especially, please shout yourself out. Tell us where you're coming in from. I mean, this broadcast is international, which again is always just incredible for me. So if you're watching, leave a comment, tell us where you're from, what you do, where you're located, if it's the evening, what time it is. And so we'll get it going. And then of course, during the conversation, please ask questions, leave comments. I tried to get to every single comment and question, and it really keeps the conversation flowing. It's super fun to do this live because of that. So just wanted to put that out there. So, John, there's so much to talk about. I want to get to a lot of what you're doing with Talent Beyond Boundaries. But of course, as always, it's really fascinating to learn about the person, right? It's not just about success to success. It's also about who's the human being behind these organizations, who's helping it, and sort of what makes them tick. So I know you're in Australia. Are you originally from Australia? Is that kind of where you grew up?
Yeah, well, sort of. I grew up, I was certainly born in Australia in a little town called Geelong. It's not that little these days, but south of Melbourne, so the bottom right-hand corner of Australia. But I actually grew up, my dad worked initially for Ford Motor Company, and I actually was a kid. I was at the age of 4 to 6. I grew up in Canada and came back with a Canadian accent. Apparently, I don't really remember much of it. And then my dad, after Ford Motor Company, worked for in television. My parents were actors. Wow. And so he ended up in television, but on the administration side. And then we moved to London in the 60s, which was pretty cool. and so we moved around a fair bit when I was a kid, and I guess that's where I got my taste for, the global stage, if you like.
Wow. And so both your parents were actors.
Yeah. One more successful than the other, but my mum was probably a better actress than my dad. But my dad was a director for a while, and then and they used to hang out with the likes of Peter Finch and old names of people, and what's that guy? It was I'm getting old and missing. But, he was a bit of a swashbuckling Hollywood legend, but an Australian actor from Tasmania, actually. So,
wow.
They used to hang out with all of those kind of guys, but you couldn't make a living out of it. And so the dad found a way to stay in the arts after the Ford Motor Company found a way to stay in the arts through ABC, which is Australia's national television network.
Wow. So he had a lot of this experience kind of doing acting related work in North America and then London. And then when you guys all moved back to Australia, kind of stayed in the industry.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, and because I had the bug as well, I wanted to be an actor. So I went to acting school, and shared that at the same time as Mel Gibson. And we actually shared, I wasn't in any of his classes, but we shared teachers, and I went to his graduation thing, and so that sort of dates me, I guess.
That's incredible. And so this was acting school. So I have 10 years of improv under my belt right now. Yeah, theaters are closed in New York City, so I'm kind of buckled down at home. But
we're doing it now, right? We're improv.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's so fascinating to me. So when you say that you went to acting school, this was in kind of grade school, up through university level?
No, it was after university. So I went to university, and that's where I got into computers and so on. But I still had the bug, So I went to Sydney Acting School. So it was a 3-year thing, and I was pretty average, I guess.
But you loved it. I'm assuming you enjoyed it at least.
Yeah, I did, and I still love it. I still appreciate a good performance, and I love movies and still go to the theater. Yeah,
that's incredible. So, all right, so this is so fascinating to me. You grew up, you went to high school, you lived all around the world. You ended up studying computer science for your undergraduate degree, and I think you got a master's as well in computer science.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking now, but did you do the master's immediately after the undergraduate, or was it sometime later?
Yeah, immediately after. So, and I actually started doing a doctorate as well. So, academia, I liked all that stuff, but then it was a competitive space. Academia is a very competitive space. I'm sure everyone knows that. And I was doing something, I was researching this particular thing in computer science. It's more mathematics, actually. And some other guy in Holland beat me to it, right? And so in the middle of my PhD, suddenly I didn't have a PhD anymore because we were searching for some, mathematical thing called a squared square, believe it or not. But and anyway, this Dutchie beat me to it, and so then I was suddenly said, well, what am I going to do now? I got to find another thing to do. And I thought, hell with that. Maybe I should give the real world a bit of a try. And I left for the real world and never came back.
Wow. So to me, those are such opposing, perhaps, types of career paths one can take, right? I mean, there's this sort of really analytical computer science, applied mathematics, and then, of course, there's the arts, which you clearly grew up around and had passion for, and I'm sure we're good at, regardless of what you might say. I'm sure you were quite good. So what do you think drew you to the computer science part of it? I mean, did you just like the academics? Did you take to it naturally? Kind of what drew you in that direction?
Look, computers are really fascinating. I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. I was quite, I was okay at school, got good grades and so on. And so I was one of those kids that, you're kind of spoiled for choice. Particularly back then, it was a much more, not as tough as it is today. So you had a lot of options. And so I actually started as a doctor, right? I enrolled in medicine, and then I thought, oh, I don't really want to do this. This doesn't seem like me. And then I switched over to engineering, and I did mechanical and electrical engineering, and I thought, yeah, I'm not crazy. And then I discovered computers, and I think what I like about computers, and I think what everyone likes about computers, is if you get into the tech of it, it's so empowering, you know. And it actually creates monsters, doesn't it? I mean, the people who think they're masters of the universe and a bit like Wall Street traders, but techies are just the same. It's a very empowering thing. All of a sudden you find, oh man, I can do all this. I can make things happen. I can make software that does stuff, and that hooks you. So I think that's what got me into it. But it's not, you know, there's a lot of people in the arts, a lot of actors, and you actually ask them, you know, if you ask around, a lot of them, not a lot of them, but a good number of them they did engineering, they did mathematics, you know, but the arts sort of, anyway. So you follow but you follow what you can make a living at too. So I at the end of my 3 years, I discovered that, yeah, I still enjoyed the process of getting into a character and learning a character and, getting your head into somebody else's space. I still find that fascinating, but I wasn't good enough at it to make a living at it. And computers I liked, so I thought, okay, that's going to stay as a hobby. Computers is what I'm going to do, and I'll stay. My artistic side will be a hobby.
Yeah, no, I love that. I suppose that's sort of how I've approached it as well. It's nice to have that creative outlet and to have something you love, but it does help to be practical as well.
Well, I think it's helped me a lot in my career, actually, you know, because I was fairly shy, kid, and I think acting, even doing this interview, right? I mean, it would have utterly freaked me out, in the early years, and but it gives you a bit of self-confidence. It gives you. And also the empathy, empathizing, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, like you need to do as an actor, is such a useful skill to have in business, right?
Yep.
Or anything, because it's seeing it from the other guy's perspective, or seeing things from the other guy's perspective, and empathizing with the other person I think it's a key to success in so many different fields.
I totally agree. I mean, we can go off on a whole nother tangent, but just to note on that, in the immigration space, absolutely, especially what you're doing, working with refugees, to be able to truly feel, I mean, to the extent that you can't compare to someone living through it, but to the extent that you can feel really helps you draw inspiration to do work in that space. But even on a technology side, to talk to a client who's telling you that they want the screen to look like this or a feature to look like that, and to understand their motivations truly is really, really helpful. So I couldn't agree with you more. If there's any advice I ever give any folks who ask me about sort of what to do, whatever, I say, take at least one improv class or suppose acting class, practice, get up and just practice being in someone else's shoes and get that muscle built a little bit. That will be, I love this topic. I can talk about this for hours.
No, you'll never regret it. I totally agree.
Agreed. So, okay. So you graduate, you're kind of figuring out that you love arts, but you are also really quite talented with mathematics and engineering. You decide, I have to be practical to some extent, at least. So my understanding is you kind of went off and you got into this financial technology space, which I guess was just kind of blossoming at the time. How did you fall into that? I mean, was that just a job that was available, or did that have something to do with your research, with respect to kind of the financial sector and applied, mathematics or engineering? How'd you get into that?
Yeah, no, it actually through horse racing, actually, because when I came out, a couple of guys I went to uni with, I'd done the usual Australian thing and gone traveling in Europe after the degree and bumming around Europe in a van for for a year, but then I came back and think, oh, I better get a proper job now. And I was looked up what my colleagues from uni were doing, and they were working in the horse racing industry in a racing. So I don't know what you call it in the US, totalizator, when you know the odds, you can place your bets, the odds appear at the racetrack, and you can place your bets on that. We call it the tote here. Anyway, you'll have. I can't. Yeah, I should sure look that up, shouldn't I? I don't know what it's called in the US, but anyway, so that's what my mates were doing. And they said there was a couple of them, and they said, "Why don't you come and join us here?" And we did it. We wrote the totalizator system in Australia, which is the thing that manages bets. And so anyway, then around about that, after that time, they were looking to automate the Australian Stock Exchange, get rid of the trading floor. And Australia was one of the first. Canada was actually the first to have a fully automated modern, what we think of now as the market. But Australia we came in a close second. And when they were looking around for what sort of people do we hire for this, that some bright spark realised that actually there was quite a link between horse racing and stock market, because the kind of system they were, because the nature of a stock market is it has long periods where nothing much is happening, and then all of a sudden, you know, there's you know, what is it, GameStop or something like that, which GameStop, and you know, all of a sudden it takes off. So you have these really high peaks where everybody's trying to access at the same time, and dealing with those sort of very intense sudden peaks in IT is a bit of a challenge. Also, it's a very highly regulated organisation. You've got government all over you, and you've got to report. And horse racing is very much the same, because when a race is about to jump, most people sit there watching the horses go around, and then just before the race jumps and looking at the odds, and and then everybody wants to place their bets at the same time, just like a minute before the race. You have these really high peaks, and it's also very highly regulated with the industry. So basically, they said, so they took us horse racing, the bunch of us that had written this betting system. And we were the team. There were 6 of us, and they brought us across to automate the stock exchange.
Wow. Did you have a company at the time with this team that automated, or you just kind of
I was a hired gun, basically.
Wow. And did they hire you all at the same time? I mean, were you just kind of the brain behind this thing, just migrated from the horse racing industry into the financial industry?
There was one of these consultants, or PA consultants, who are a bit like Accenture, or you know, one of those big consulting firms, and they were kind of doing that. They made the decision, but we were the team put together for it. And we came from. There wasn't just my mates from university. There was us, but there was also a couple of others that we got to know, but it was a tight little team, still in touch with most of them. So it was a lot of fun. We're all young guns, and thought it was fantastic. Actually, it was great.
I was going to ask, what was it? I mean, it must have been so exciting. You're kind of revolutionizing an industry.
Yeah.
Did you realize the kind of gravity of what you were doing from a global perspective? Or was it just like a job, you know?
No, definitely not. No, we were excited about it. We thought it was so logical. But, you know, the old way of trading, you know, the floor trading was just so flawed, right? Particularly for the person wanting to buy shares, you never knew whether you got the best price or whether you were getting screwed or whatever. You know, you never knew that. So, you know, it was fundamentally a much fairer system. So yeah, we knew it was. So we were excited by it. And it was good fun, but it was stressful because the floor it was very controversial at the time. So the people who'd spent their lives trading on the floor hated us. Mm-hmm. And so when we go on the floor to be trying to understand how the system worked and so on, we'd get a lot of abuse, right? So people would come up to us, and so it was a lot of abuse. And actually, when we went live, we were hoping for a nice, quiet day's trading. We went live. We went live the day of the '87 crash,
Wow.
And we were live, and there were television cameras there and everything watching it. And then the market was just going nuts. And then journalists were saying, look what you've done, and you've destroyed the market. What a disaster this is. And I was saying, well, hey, it's not us. Look, it's happening in New York. It's happening around the world. It's not, we didn't make it happen.
Yeah.
But we managed to stay. That was a really intense day, that first day, but we managed, because it was just the complete opposite of a quiet trading day. It was absolutely insane. And but we staggered through to the end of the day, and the system held up, and so it was pretty tense.
Oh man, I just played out that whole movie in my head. That sounds intense. That's so crazy. So and obviously it stuck around. It draws so many parallels in my mind between this industry in the late 80s to even what today the immigration space is, just not from maybe the refugee perspective, but from the kind of business of immigration, how it's being disrupted by technology. There is a lot of tension between traditional practitioners who tend to find or try to find the holes, and it's never perfect. No, digitization of an industry is perfect, but it's just interesting. There's always going to be a struggle between the kind of the old and the new.
Yeah. And look, you've got to sympathize. If these are people who've spent their lives doing something, and all of a sudden it kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's take people's careers away. You got to fight in your hand,
right?
But sometimes it's what has to happen. And if we hadn't done it, somebody else would have done it, right? It's kind of inevitable. But
exactly. So
actually, sorry, I just realized I skipped over my US, and I actually met my wife in the US. This is before when I went traveling, and then before I got into the stock exchange thing. I lived in New York for 4 years in the Upper West Side. I met my wife there. I thought that might be interest to you. So I'm a big fan of the US, and we love it, particularly New York.
Do you remember where you lived in New York, kind of the area?
Yeah, I lived on 24th and 2nd initially, and then when I met my wife, we moved in. She had a really lovely brownstone on the Upper West Side, West 89th Street, and
that sounds like a picture perfect area. So you got to hang out in Central Park a little bit back then.
Yeah, although it was a bit more confronting back. This is the days of Mayor Koch and garbage strikes and taxi driver, and it was a different New York then, but it was still pretty exciting.
That was Robert De Niro's New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's cool. So wow, so you lived in Canada, you lived in the US, you lived in London, really major hubs. Where were you living in Canada? Was that in Toronto?
I was living in a little town called Windsor, because my dad was working for Ford Motor Company, and Windsor's just across the border from Detroit. And but he was working for Ford Canada. But so I haven't been back since. But we've got TBB has got Talent Beyond Boundaries has got a Canadian. We do a lot of great work in Canada, and I'm really crazily, I've never managed to get back there, and I'm really looking forward to getting back there and visiting Windsor actually.
Yeah, that'd be fun to see the old stomping ground.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's move forward a little bit, because I really want to get to, of course, Talent Beyond Borders. On the way there, I want to talk. You built this system that revolutionized the Australian stock exchange, and of course, just globally. You then had a career within the financial space, kind of seems like architecting systems. We don't really need to go into the details of that, although personally, I'm probably really interested in that as well. But after that, you had a career in, I think I read UBS and
UBS and Barclays,
right? Yeah. And after that is when you launched your first company, right? I suppose you kind of you restarted your company and you built a platform called Cameron FIX. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of maybe what inspired you to kind of go off on your own for that first time?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I got sacked. So I was actually working for Barclays in Paris. So I actually lived in France for 4 years, and that's where my kids actually grew up. Went to school in Paris. So I worked for it was called BZW then in Paris, and then we moved back. We moved to the UK after that, and I was working for Barclays in the UK. In their portfolio management, and I was their chief architect, and I had a few problems with I managed to get myself sacked. So and I always say to people, if you haven't been sacked a couple of times in your career, you haven't been trying, I reckon. So I suddenly found myself, I got sacked. So what am I going to do now? And I asked one of my old mates that I used to know from the BZW, the Paris days, and he was working for UBS back then. And he said, you should look at this thing called FIX. This thing called FIX, which is it's actually the sort of the language that even today it's the language that electronic trading applications talk. It's the way computers talk when they're electronic trading, and it's all around. It's global. It's around the world. It's China. It's India. It's US. Everywhere. So I said I'd never heard of it before. So I thought I'll have a look at that while I'm on out of work, mm-hmm. and I started work. I had a look into that, and I actually wrote a little FIX, implementation, if you like, and then I eventually got a job at UBS. The guy who'd introduced me to FIX said, "Oh, come and work for us at UBS." So I was working with UBS in London in their international market links team. But I had this FIX thing, and actually I thought, what am I going to do with this? I thought I'll just make it open source. I'll put it out there. And, well, all of a sudden, it actually turned out it was running about 100 times faster than any of the competitors. And so all of a sudden, all these people say, hey, what's this? I'm going to use this. And all of a sudden, instead, I actually had big companies wanting to get hold of my FIX software. So anyway, you asked for a short answer. I'm giving you a long answer. But basically that product actually became... It sort of outgrew me, and I returned to Australia because my dad was sick, and I wanted to go. I'd been away by that time for about 8 years, and then what am I going to do? And someone said, well, you should take this FIX thing seriously. Why don't you make a company around it and see how you go? So I did, and it took off, and that's where my money came from. So I ended up about a few years later. Actually in New York, as we were talking just briefly, we actually had a sales process in New York in around 2006, and I ended up selling it to a Swedish company, and it's still out there, still being used, CameronFIX, but I don't have any interest in it anymore. So that's where I made my money, basically. So yeah,
that's fascinating. It's so cool to think that you kind of built this side project that actually was the best thing on the market.
Yeah, well, it came from my background in the horse racing and the trading in the market. I actually knew how electronic markets worked, and I knew a lot of people writing software back then came from an accounting background, and whereas I came from this kind of high-speed trading background, so I kind of knew how to make things fast. And so that's it's being in the right place, the right time,
It's so fascinating. That's so cool. So you ran CameronFIX for, I read, about 5 years before you sold it. And I'm just curious. I mean, we don't have to go too deep into it, but did you just kind of want to step away? Were you tired, or did you get an offer you couldn't refuse? I mean, why'd you want to kind of sell it off?
It goes right back to that question we were talking right at the beginning about the global thing. It was killing me, right? We're a small company, but it was just, I was this 24/7. I was going around the world, literally flying around the world several times every year, and it was just, I couldn't keep it up. And I was, how old was I? I was in my 50s, so I didn't have the energy I used to have as a younger guy. So and I had a young family and all that stuff. So I just thought, this is great, fantastic. I'm going to cash in my chips now, right? So, hey guys, I know you want to keep, and everyone else want to keep it going. And probably if I'd hung on to it longer, maybe we could have got more for it. But for me, I couldn't do it much longer. So, I'm a techie too, really more than that's what I really love doing. And I was just about, I had enough basically. And it turns out it was a good time to sell it, got a good price, and changed my life and empowered me to do other things, right?
Yeah, and then I was going to say, like you mentioned, you were a techie, but then of course you became the CEO of a company. You probably weren't doing the day-to-day coding anymore. You were managing this big global business.
Well, it wasn't big. We were 25, 30 people. That's all it was. We had offices in London and New York and Sydney, and we had partners in Japan and Germany and elsewhere. But nevertheless, it was like there was only 25.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was small company. So it wasn't like I was, so I'm not Bill Gates, right? I small potatoes, right? But enough to certainly change my life and to empower me to have money to do other stuff.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So to move on a little bit from that, I mean, you had this exit, and again, like you said, you came into kind of more of a life-changing circumstance. But before you joined Talent Beyond Boundaries, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and then of course a little bit of additional research. You started another organization that effectively partnered or connected consumers in Australia with local vintners, but I think they sell more than just wine now. But where did it, as I was looking at it, I was thinking to myself, okay, you kind of create marketplaces. You almost create electronic marketplaces. Yeah, is that what you were thinking? Like, how did that idea come about? It seems so different from everything else you had done before.
Was it? Yeah, I guess it was. But marketplaces were a hot thing, particularly back then. You've got, now the marketplaces are everywhere, whether it's Uber or Airbnb or whatever. Marketplaces are the thing, and they were. Etsy was a marketplace. There were a couple of, there were some early marketplaces back then. So it was sort of in the air, the idea of a marketplace. And I'd started with the money. I'd started doing philanthropy, fairly traditional philanthropy, giving to organisations, great organisations like Red Cross and Amnesty and Save the Children and UNHCR and so on. So I was just doing that, but I wanted to do something that used my skills, right? That I felt like I still had something. So I was looking for some technology solutions where I could sort of use technology to solve a problem. And one of the problems out there, which was clear, was producers, the people who make stuff, make cheese or wine or whatever, they and farmers generally, right? Any kind of producer, it gets disintermediated by the middlemen, right? You've got the big supermarkets or so on, the big distributors who distribute product, and then you've got the producers, but in the middle, that the power is all on one side, the power, and then you've got the customer at the other end, but you've got these big supermarkets and distributors in the middle, and they're taking all the profits. Mm-hmm. And what's happening, and it's still happening, it's still a problem, is the little producer who makes a beautiful bottle of wine, right? But he's not big, but he just really loves and knows what he does. And you kind of want to encourage them, right? Because that's where innovation comes from. That's where great stuff comes from. But unless they're wilting on the vine, because the big supermarkets, they're not interested unless you're a big guy and you can provide them with truckloads of product every month or something. You're just a waste of time. So I think that's a problem, and it's still a problem. And I thought, well, a marketplace is all about connecting the consumer directly with the producer. And so I thought I can do that. And so I got into that sort of marketplace space, which actually ended up, Talent Beyond Boundaries, there's the segue. is a marketplace. At the end, that was the initial. So I then got interested in that. So I sold up. I actually had a great partner, Lloyd Heinrich, and he now's the CEO of a wine organisation in Australia, and I basically sold the whole thing to him, and he's managing it now and doing great guns with it. He actually worked with Redbubble, and he's had a lot of stuff with US-based marketplaces too. Anyway, another story. But I wanted to get into this Talent Beyond Boundaries idea of having refugees as the producers of the skills, and employers as the consumers, and having some kind of automated way where we could connect these two, like an employer in Australia on one side of the world, and a skilled refugee, doing it tough in Beirut, from out of educated in Syria but can't get a job, hasn't got job rights, so, and whose skills are basically invisible, because hey, you're just a refugee, you lose your identity as a refugee, which is one of the worst things someone can take from you. We wanted to make those skills visible, and a marketplace is a perfect place to do that. So I thought, hey, this is from the producer too here. I can do all this.
So so many questions there, but if I can ask kind of two main ones, number one, and this is in part because I think it's always exciting to hear and interesting to hear people's motivations to exit opportunities. If you can share kind of what moved you to, kind of sell off or pass on the reins from the producers. Is it because you wanted to move on to something different, or, and then I guess the second question, maybe they're tied together. How did you get introduced to the Talent Beyond Boundaries team? Because I think it was also co-founded by a couple. And so how did that sort of happen? And I wonder, maybe they're two separate answers. Maybe they're kind of, one leads into the other.
Yeah, well, all the time I was doing from the producer, I was doing my normal philanthropy, right? So, and which is very inspiring. And getting into people think of philanthropy is all about giving, but actually you get so much from doing philanthropy, and that's a cliche. But the people meet, and it's just such an inspiring space to get into. So I was doing that while I was doing the from the producer stuff. So, and Amnesty International was one of the ones we support, and they introduced me to this guy. We had a little dinner in Melbourne, and he was a human rights activist working on the Turkish border. He was a Kurdish refugee himself, and they brought him out to talk about what was going on, particularly in that area and in Syria, and he blew me away. I mean, this guy, it wasn't my idea of who a refugee is. I was very ignorant, really. Basically, I thought refugees, they're somebody that I should feel compassion for and feel sorry for, and it's unfortunate. But the idea of them being what I was seeing in front of me, this articulate, super smart, well-educated, courageous individual, oh, well, that's a refugee. I mean, and so it just really opened my eyes, and that I was pigeonholed. I was doing what other people do. It's sometimes stripping refugees of their identity and not looking at them as a refugee. That's not what they are. That's just something that's happened to them, right? So I suddenly thought, well, number one, how did Amnesty get this refugee here? Because I'd also thought, well, refugees, they can't move. So Amnesty had managed to get this refugee a visa to come to Australia and talk about the situation that he was seeing back on the Turkish border there. And the other thing was, these people, why can't these people? He has amazing skills. He had good English. I said, if there are other people like you out there, why can't you guys get out just being hired through the international, using your skills to get yourself out? And so that's what got me started with thinking about a Talent Beyond Boundaries. So I actually wrote a little proposal to Amnesty, very amateurish, but a sketch of what I thought was a marketplace where refugees, we can make these people within their skills visible on one side, and we could reach out to employers the other side. And obviously we had to do work on the immigration side to find visa pathways. But I could see that this worked for business. It worked for government. There's businesses who are searching for skills and they can't get them. They're in short supply. I knew that as an employer. You can never get enough good computer programmers, right? There's just not enough of them around. So you're poaching off other people, but it's a tight market. And then even for businesses, even for the government, it's good for the country, right? These are skilled people coming in, filling skills gaps in the country. So I just could see this. These are winners. It's winning. Everyone's winning here. There's nobody losing, and these refugees are getting out. So I put the proposal up and to Amnesty, and they sort of tidied it up for me, and I showed it to some other people in the sector I'd been introduced to, and they made it look a bit more professional. And we showed it to current government, who's quite a conservative government in Australia, but I thought this should appeal to go across the political spectrum, right? Because it's the economic side of it, and they came back with encouraging, the government was interested. That's an interesting thing. I probably never thought it would come to anything. So, but it was enough to encourage me to keep going. And then pretty soon after, I discovered my co-founders in the US, the Cohens, and they'd been doing kind of the same thing. And their huge, amazing achievement, that actually managed to, it was the tail end of the Obama administration, and they'd managed to get some State Department funding to get something up and going in Lebanon and Jordan, where we could actually go into those countries and actually start gathering the skills onto a database. And this was initially funded by the US State Department. Wow. Unfortunately, there was a change of administration, as we all know, and the Trump administration came in, and that all shut down. But by that time, we'd got something up and going. So they were doing it. So the Cohens were doing it very much on the supply side, right, and getting these offices up. And I was kind of doing it on the demand side with using my own networks and so on in Australia, and trying to get the government interest, government advocacy to get the visa pathways going. So I jumped on a plane. I'd come across them on the internet, and we'd had a couple of conversations, and I said, I just got to meet these people. And I jumped on a plane to Washington, DC, and knocked on their door, and we met the Cohens, and they were having a few technical problems at the time with database. Oh, wow, that's fantastic. I can help fix that. And we said, my thing wasn't called Talent Beyond Boundaries. I was called the Refugee Jobs Marketplace. And not surprisingly, right? That's what it was. But I think Talent Beyond Boundaries is a much catchier one. So let's join forces under that banner, and that's how we all came together.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, when you flew out here to DC, I mean, obviously this was pre-COVID, but this was already when the Trump administration was in power. So what year was this? About 2017?
This is 2016. Yeah. 16.
Okay. And now, were you
probably we came across each other in 2016, but actually that flight was beginning of 2017. Yeah.
And did you propose that? I mean, I'm curious, like, were you saying, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to code and I'm going to build a database, or did you have a team in mind? Like, did you want to get your hands dirty with this? And I guess, did you?
Yes, I did. Dirtier than I expected, because actually what I discovered, I was initially thinking I would use basically the From the Producer platform, something like that, and just, hack it around to make it work for this different marketplace. But what I discovered is that the Cohens, the State Department had also, and it was had got some software off the ground, and it was really good. It was written by a Syrian refugee, so they were using that. The trouble is, the guy who'd written it had moved on, and it had been taken over, and it hadn't had much love, and it hadn't. The group that taken over hadn't done a great job on it. It was actually in bad shape. So I basically took it over from that. So basically I hit the ground running, in the sense they already had something there. it needed a bit of work, and it was costing them money to keep it going because it was having problems and they were getting charged to fix the problems. I say, okay, I can do all that. So I took it over. So that we really got it. So it was perfect, it actually accelerated. And I think from their side, I could use my corporate network and so on in Australia. So we had both the supply and demand side. We couldn't have done it without each other, really.
Yeah.
And coming together really just really accelerated the progress we could make together.
I feel like what's really inspiring to me about that is, just, I don't know, this idea that at least from your side, from your end personally, that, I don't know, you found another project and you just rolled up your sleeves and just got back to work as if you were building kind of your first ever data. You dug in, I presume, and you looked at the data and you're like, this is messy, and you went home and you coded, and I don't know, it just like, it's inspiring because you could have probably easily found someone to help you do this for you, right? You at this point, I'm sure, had network of people who were also good developers and such, but I guess the idea that you're like, you want to jump in and do this, I think to me is such a cool image.
Yeah, but money counts, and both the Cohens are very successful not immigration lawyers, very successful lawyers in DC, and but they had already had a career and they had some money. They're philanthropists as well, and I did too. So it's actually the privilege of being in the position to be able to afford to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew people who could help me, but people have their own lives. They're still, making that money out of CameronFIX, it was empowering, because all of a sudden you find yourself, what do you do when you get rich, when you hit the jackpot? Actually, the one thing there isn't a book on how to be rich, right? And actually it's a challenge. If you suddenly got, okay, now you don't have, you're financially independent. You can do whatever you like. What do you do? And a lot of people do that badly. They do that really badly. Sometimes it screws up. You read all the stories, people win the lottery and then they end up and it ruins their lives. With the freedom is a kind of a dangerous thing in some ways. So I guess coming back to your point, I know that it was great. I had certain skills that I still enjoyed practicing, and I had the freedom, the financial freedom to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and I don't have to worry about paying the bills and all the rest of it, So, and I think the same with the Cohens. So I think I look up to Bill Gates, to be honest. I see when you say the book on how to be rich, I think the Gates Foundation is a fantastic model for people who do. I mean, we don't have the money that the Gates Foundation does, but it's a model.
Yeah.
Of how to when you find yourself in that fortunate situation, what do you do with it?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I was just talking to someone on LinkedIn today who posted, shared something about a book all about how to get rich. To your point, lots of books about that.
Yeah.
But this
how to be rich.
Yeah.
People screw it up all the time. You look at all that. What are you doing with your life here? You're nuts. You're wasting this amazing opportunity you've got. And it's not gonna. And often it doesn't even bring the person happiness or any kind of peace. It often screws them up. So it is there should be a book. Oh, maybe I'll write that now. I think Bill Gates has probably already written a book.
Yeah, so. there's room for healthy competition on the book. Yes. I wanted to just a couple of, this is from a while back, but Nicola from Germany. Hey, Nicola, thanks for tuning in. And then Stuart Bradley saying, hey, Roman, and hey, John.
Hi, Stuart.
So thank you all. I want to talk a little bit about, because I want to talk a little bit about how Talent Beyond Boundaries works. So how do you find, I know you have your network, and I'm sure that the Cohens also they're in DC. I'm sure they have access, and you work with a lot of partners, nonprofits and law firms that support you. How do you how does this thing work? How does it run? How does it actually find the talent around the world? And then also, how do you find the jobs and all that?
Yeah, well, talent, initially that was we used to just go out into, in Lebanon and Jordan, and we had a lot of volunteers, and we have the staff on the ground to go out in refugees. But now people are starting to find us, so that's probably not the same problem that we had in the early days. So refugees find us, getting known, and I thank you for this opportunity, because just getting known is a good story. And once people know it, they usually want to get behind it, and because everyone wins really. So getting known and things like this are great to help us getting known, and particularly with huge opportunities in the US at the moment too, I think, with the new administration. And the employer outreach, well, you've got your networks, so that's it. I think the key one, and probably the most interesting, because I know this is the focus, is one of the real challenges. It's not just the getting the candidates and getting that both sides of the marketplace. It's the in-between bit, and that's where the migration side of it really becomes important, because you've got an employer who wants to hire a candidate. Okay, that's good. They made a job offer. Now, how do we get the person from here to there and through the immigration system? Because refugees, as people on this call know better than I do, have special issues that barriers that actually make it harder for them to be, maybe they don't have a valid passport, maybe they don't have evidence of their qualifications, all those things. How do we make those make those pathways exist? And that's where we partner up. One of our key partners is with migration agents. So I'm really, really pleased to be talking to this group of people on this call.
I love that. How, from that perspective, then, how can the immigration industry help, right? I mean, obviously, to your point, that middle part is the challenge, actually doing the paperwork and getting people from one country, not physically, but legally from one country to the other, making sure they can work. Where can the immigration industry come in to support? Is it pro bono immigration or kind of visa services around the world? Is it donations? Is it something else? I mean, where do you think the immigration space can help?
I think it's an advocacy, really. Now here in the US, I think there's a great President Biden's got an enormous amount on his plate, but I know migration's one of them, and unwinding some of the stuff that the previous administration put into place. So, I think advocacy for skilled visas for refugees, right? So there exist humanitarian visas, and we don't want to we want everything we do needs to be on top of that, right? We're all about getting more people out. So, but governments they have quotas that they're going to bring in so many refugees in on humanitarian pathways. And that's based on the vulnerability. Selection of who gets to come is based on the most vulnerable first. And that is, that's you don't touch that. That's the way it should be. But we're all about saying this is a new pathway. There's some refugees out there who they may well be vulnerable as well, right? But the vulnerability is a lottery, right? There's this tiny proportion of people get out through humanitarian channels, and governments, you don't win a whole lot of votes with humanitarian quotas, unfortunately, and it's costly and all the rest of it. But skills, so using the skilled pathway to get out and helping remove barriers that do exist that make it difficult for refugees who've got skills to compete on a level playing field with everybody else. And why shouldn't they be able to? The fact that they're refugees is unfortunate, but it shouldn't be. It should be irrelevant. They've got the skills. So I think advocacy and putting them with government and so on and is important. We don't actually ask migration agents to be pro bono necessarily, because it is a commercial thing. When an employer hires internationally right now, they pay the bills, right? They pay the migration agent. Typically, it's the employer who pays the migration agent. So, so we don't actually need people to work for pro bono. Maybe they give us a bit of a mates rates kind of thing for, because it's a worthy thing, but helping us, I think we just really want the relationships and the network, right? Migration agents work with, the big companies who've got skills gaps, right? So you can help us with putting us in touch with maybe some of your clients you think might be interested in taking a look at our skilled talent pool. Because it's not charity we're doing here.
Right.
Not charity at all, right? In fact, we say to employer, if you don't hire them just because they're a refugee, right? If you want to just do something give money to UNHCR, you hire people because they've got skills that you need, because it doesn't work. It wouldn't be a good result if someone hires someone just because they're a refugee, but they can't really do the job. They come into the country, they're struggling with the work because they weren't really qualified. It just reinforces all those negative stereotypes. We don't want that, and an employer will get a bad experience and they'll never do it again, right? So we want people. This is not charity. We want employers. So it's a normal commercial international hire, and that means there's money in the system. That means your migration agents can charge normal fees and so on. So it's not about money. It's not necessarily about pro bono. I would never say no to a bit of pro bono. It's always helpful, but not necessary. It's just getting the word out into and giving us connections into your corporate networks.
Now, let me ask you this, because you mentioned advocacy, which I think is, makes total sense. Are you seeing immigration programs or schemes around the world that do find this overlap between skilled labor and refugees? Because I really love what you said. You don't want to touch the kind of humanitarian numbers, because that should be supporting the people who are just absolutely vulnerable.
Yeah.
The individuals that you're helping are also vulnerable. They just have this additional benefit of having really in-demand skills that theoretically could give them another pathway into kind of a better life that doesn't take away from the folks who just really need to be lifted.
No.
Exactly. But I'm assuming it's also tough to get them in through the ordinary kind of work visa channels, I suppose. Or is it not? Is that how you?
If I would say if it is, now we're doing, our 3 destinations at the moment are Canada, Australia, and the UK. And that's if you look at the political climate, it's across the political spectrum, but which just shows that this appeals across the political spectrum, left, right, doesn't matter. What's all that's needed? I would say if a skilled person can't come through your skilled channels, when they've got an employer who's saying, yeah, I'll pay for it, I want to hire them, there's something wrong with your channels, right? Fix it. Why? What's the, and that's really the approach. And it's been working. And it's been working in Australia, and doing some work, labour mobility adjustments to skilled visas, which take account of the special positions that a refugee is. It's not lowering the bar, or it's not charity. It's just simply saying, okay, I get it. You're a refugee. Yeah, I get you. It's tough for you to renew your passport or whatever. I get it that you haven't got the original copies of your university qualification, whatever. I get that, because we understand that. So, but we're going to make it so that doesn't stop you from, using your skills to get yourself out. And we're doing that in Australia. Canada has been amazing. Of course, Canada's a shining example in this space for many, many years, and been doing great stuff there. And in the UK as well. The UK with Brexit and even COVID, for example, but particularly Brexit, skills is that they know they've got a skills issue, right? So actually we're getting a lot of great support from the current UK government and the Home Office. So it's just the logic of it. The logic of it's there. It's just logical, right? And I think once you just put the logic out there, people say, oh yeah, okay, let's do it.
And I hope, to your point, that with the kind of currently new U.S. administration, the numbers will increase, and I think the number of refugee in kind of visas that are going to be allotted will go up, and hopefully that will help. But to your point, we don't want to use the refugee visas if possible. Let's just get these folks in an ordinary employment visa, which of course is also necessary in a struggling economy. I'm curious, kind of, to kind of start wrapping it up. I'm wondering, where do you see, I guess, Talent Beyond Boundaries going? Is it expansion into more countries? Is it sort of an increased technological support system? What do you see for the future, maybe for the next few years and perhaps down the line as well?
I think our technology will survive us. I think we see Talent Beyond Boundaries as eventually disappearing, because it's all the organizations that are needed to support, the migration agents, the settlement services for refugees, the employment community, the players, the stakeholders are all there. We're here Talent Beyond Boundaries is there to kind of introduce this idea, to do the advocacy, to join the dots, if you like, and then step back, right? We don't actually aspire to become sort of a brand new NGO, massive NGO. We aspire actually ultimately to disappear now, or on a country by country basis, destination basis. Maybe we're thinking in the UK, maybe if we in 2 or 3 years' time, if we haven't got this up and going in the UK, for example, which is one of our newest destination, I will consider that a bit of a failure. That we should be done in the UK, and it should just be happening with the migration agents, the employers, the candidates. So I think Talent Beyond Boundaries is a catalyst, and we see it probably not going to become. I don't see it personally as being here forever. Mm-hmm. I hope not, actually. But I think our technology will live on, and as well as the pathways we've helped advocate to get put in place. I think our technology that we've developed over the years to actually, which is a database and matching and all that, you can imagine what it does. I think that will survive. So to that aim, just recently, just in fact in the last week, so this is hot off the press, we've open sourced all our software. Wow. So our software now is in complete open source. So we're hoping that others will, if there's something that you need that's not in there, come and help us build it, and we can sort of build it together. So that our technology will be the legacy. Our legacy will also be the pathways we've advocated for and established to facilitate this labour mobility, and then no more need for TBB, theoretically.
And so can employers go onto the website now and sort of sign up if they're looking for work?
Yeah, absolutely. That's our challenge at the moment. And so I'd encourage everyone on this call to spread the word. And you've got actually the people on this call, your clients are exactly the people that who are people who used to doing international hiring. That's our target. Mm-hmm. These are our target. And we're very employer-led too. We're driven by employers. We don't choose which candidates we move out. Employers do. They go through a competitive recruitment process, and the employer eventually says, yeah, that's the one I want to hire. So it's very much employer-led. So we can't do anything without employers. So it's really important to make those connections. So,
approximately how many people do you have in your database? I think I saw this on the website, but
it's about 25,000 now. Wow. But we haven't really. I mean, the potential is a lot higher, and we're only operating in Jordan and Lebanon. I mean, there's a few million Syrian refugees there. So, but it's the model we want to go to more, as you were asked earlier, and I sort of kind of forgot about it. How does TBB expand, but how does this model expand? Different source countries, not just Lebanon. Maybe Turkey, maybe South America and we actually are doing it in Africa. We actually are doing stuff with partners. Actually, in Kenya, with a company called Refuge Point, we're doing stuff with an organisation called HIAS in South America. So expanding to different source countries where there are refugees, looking and we can reach out to, and also destinations, opening up other destinations, and we are looking at that in other destinations in Europe. Hopefully, the US is going to come online now as well. So that's how the model scales.
Got it. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for all that information. And so, I mean, this is a no-brainer in my mind. This is an absolute no-brainer. It's really just about informing people about it. I don't even think there's no sales pitch. It's a given. It's just getting this in front of people and exposing them to this idea.
Yeah, people come up and say, oh, but how do they? What if they? I mean, there are problems, there are barriers, and every country, but the concept is a no-brainer. And as I said, if it's not working, it should, right? It's not like, I don't think you don't often get you do get people saying, oh yeah, but what about this? What about that? What about the other? And they may be right. They're basically pointing out barriers. But the one thing we can agree on is it should happen. So if there are barriers there, let's knock them down because they don't make any sense.
Absolutely. Well, John, I like to end usually on kind of more of a fun or lighthearted question. Yeah. What's your, I know you kind of worked in the wine industry. I'm curious for the listeners out there, because I'm assuming you may be a little bit of an expert. What's your favorite kind of go-to wine? I know Australia has an incredible wine country. What's kind of your go-to?
I'm a bit of that's an impossible question. But I'm a bit of a red guy. I like a nice red. I mean, Australia is a great wine, but I've lived in France too, and I'm just a big fan of French wine as well. I love French. I love a beautiful French Burgundy, for example. So a Pinot, but in Australia, I mean, we do Shiraz really well. So, but then Chardonnay. Again, that can kind of really ring my bells too, and again, that's Burgundy, beautiful white Burgundy Chardonnays, but Australia does, and New Zealand does amazing wines too. And I know the US does. I spent a wonderful Christmas. One of the best Christmas I ever had was in Santa Fe when I was bumming around the US, and I met some people, and they kindly invited me to spend Christmas with them in Santa Fe. And I said, okay, I'm going to do the wine. And I didn't know anything about American wine, but I got a guidebook. It was a Hugh Johnson or somebody. I got a guidebook, a little book from a bookshop, and I just went, and then I took this book with me, and I went to a local store somewhere in Santa Fe, and I just bought a whole bunch of wine. And I tell you what, that opened my eyes to American Californian wine, particularly. It just was amazing. So that's one of my favorite Christmases. So,
wow. That's so fun. Just as a kind of a note, I have a friend who's a big wine enthusiast, and he's very, very bullish on Oregon and Washington state wine.
Oh yeah, no, out of the park. I mean, some of their Pinots just to die for. Yeah, love it.
And I need to really dive into this industry a bit more. I'm still one of those people that's like, "What's your best red?" And then they offer something, and I said, "Sure." I say it kind of, but I don't know what I don't know enough. So,
but that's the fun of it, right? You're discovering stuff, and the journey. I actually am not a wine expert. I don't have a very good memory for it. People taste it. Oh, that's from here and there. But I do know what I like, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great hobby.
Yeah. One of these days, once I get over this 24-hour work cycle, I'll get it. Well, John, thank you so much. I mean, I've learned so much, and really inspiring. I have so many ideas that I want to kind of run by you and sort of connections and things like that. So, but I think that, again, to me, this is a no-brainer, and I hope that for anybody listening, check it out. The website is talentbeyondboundaries.org, right? Yep. And so for folks, please check it out. Check out the website, see the partners, see who they're working with, and do what you can to spread the word. I know I certainly will.
And I'm on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, and or to Talent Beyond Boundaries on LinkedIn. That's actually a great. We get a lot of our connections to corporates, particularly, and migration agents through LinkedIn. So yeah, it's, I hope we haven't managed to have any questions because I've talked too much, but yeah, let's connect.
Definitely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, thank you again so much. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Roman.
Absolutely. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna put you just behind the scenes for a moment, but if you could just hold on for 1 sec here.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for folks who are joined live or are listening to this afterwards. What an incredible opportunity to learn about this and talk to John and hear his stories. Again, check out Talent Beyond Boundaries. talentbeyondboundaries.org. Please check out the website, follow them on LinkedIn, follow John Cameron on LinkedIn. And, let's do what we can to, again, help the people that need help, but also provide really wonderful, skilled folks to companies that need it. It's a win-win, really a no-brainer around the world. So in any case, have a good weekend, everybody. As always, peace out and see you next week.